called Christos Collective. We've had a couple of their shows in our space. It's all professional artists, contemporary professional artists, and they do shows together, show them throughout the Denver area, and obviously we've had them here, and we'll probably have them again, but my friend Sandy just said, I think you need to talk to Louise. We had our first conversation last June, and I have a background in ceramics and sculpture, and Louise has a sculpture background as well in painting. And when I first saw her website and I saw some of her sculptural work, I was like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. And knowing we were moving to this new space, I was very excited about one day having sculpture in our space here, where we couldn't in our other space. But then as Louise and I talked, she began to show me some of her other bodies of work that she has that deal with conversations, important conversations that need to be had. And it fits very much in line with what the gallery are committed to. And so that's when we decided, hey, let's have this show. We are still watching. We always want to be very thoughtful and mindful of what we put up in January, because it's not just about, oh, let's do something for Black History Month. No, it's just really about how can we engage people in the conversation and move it forward. You know, Unite KC, we talk about one good thing, one good thing. We've talked about in this show not to look and feel shame, but what are you going to do to move forward, to move the ball forward? And I think that's very similar. We say one good thing, but she says it in the sense of what are we going to do to move forward? So it's a very similar thought. And so I won't say much more. I'll just introduce Louise. Her husband's with her. 2 of her 3 boys are with her, which you've gotten to talk with. And originally she's from the Chicago area. She's lived in Colorado a while. And
yes, a long while now.
Yes, and I've enjoyed really getting to know her more this weekend around her family. The boys are awesome and funny. And so that's a reflection, obviously, of the way that they have raised them. So, Louise, it's all yours. We put you over here because of the light.
I know, I know, they were trying to angle it and see, because it does, yeah. I always say when I'm with my boys, and with my husband, if they stand over me, then I'm the darkest one. It's like a shadow. It's like all you see is shadow. And they're trying to see how am I now?
Try moving it back a little bit.
Like right here?
They're trying to give me light. They're trying to make me lighter so you can see me.
I mean, it's hard because the light bounces off the white wall.
The light is behind us,
yeah.
So I'm not going.
Yeah. Oh, you need drum lighting.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. Yeah.
This way. So.
Just so you know, you look really good live.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
That you do.
They're all missing out.
Right there's good. Or anywhere in like the backish area because the lights are still on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Here we go. All right. So, but I just feel so far away. Yeah. It's like I feel so far away from her.
I mean, if you move, you can move forward, and it's going to lighten up your face anyway because you'll be focused onto the camera.
Okay, well, all right. So, okay, see, there you go. Now you feel. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, yes, everybody move forward.
Come forward. You can move your chairs, y'all.
Right.
Yeah.
So I feel so much closer to you guys now. So before I start, I'm actually gonna have Philip read a poem. That he didn't know, because they've been doing poems throughout the whole thing. Because I write poems with the work when I create it. The poems do not always come the day I create the artwork. A lot of times the poems come after I create the artwork, after the work is sort of marinated. Pretty sure you understand what marinated is. Once it's marinated and I've ingested it, because I don't always ingest my work when I create it. One of the things I was sharing with Kelly, I said, I learn every time I open this box. Every time I show this exhibit, I learn something. I examine another and find out even about it. And that's what I love about it. And I know, like, we've all been in school before, and learn things from teachers, and then it's like, you even remember that, after you take that test, that math equation is gone. And so it happens a lot when I do these kinds of assignments, when God gives me these kind of things, because I have to process. And so when I did this exhibit, there was a lot of research that went into it. And so you're talking about studying all of these characters and all of these people and ingesting their lives all at one time. And normally this goes over a course of months and years of bringing this kind of exhibit to fruition. And it'll start with one part of the exhibit to expand into another part, into another part. Like this feels like a collection of four exhibits, exhibitions. So I'm going to have Philip read this, and then we're going to go into this and the creation of this exhibition. We're going to have this one. I love my children. I put them on the spot all the time.
All right, Matt's gonna start. The course stubble on my face is just tearing it to shreds. So please let me know if there's a bunch of strings on your face. It's all over. All right. What makes a man not a man? He is seen through the eyes of another man. A man whose thoughts and intentions have made him better. The eyes of hate, the eyes of envy, the eyes of greed, the eyes of self-righteousness, the eyes of pride. What makes a man not a man? Only another man. I was once a man, no longer here. I was once king of my land, but no longer here. I was once a leader of nations, but no longer here. I was once a warrior, but no longer here. I was once a child who played and laughed, but no longer here. I was once my own master, no longer here. I was once told I could be anything, but no longer here. I was once a ruler of nations, but no longer here. I was once my father's son, but no longer here. No longer here, no longer here. I am no longer here.
That particular poem came later, after I was creating the body of work. And this particular body of work came out of another body of work that was called Springs of Black Man that I created for my son. My oldest son was out of college. And so I created this entire body of work for him because I began to recognize the struggle that he was having growing up as a Black man in Chicago. And my son, my older son, is very tall and big. And he was very expressive of his blackness. Very expressive. When his senior year came in, his mom would always cut his hair and all that kind of stuff so that he could look presentable. And so when he turned senior, he grew all his hair out. He has hair like mine, no matter what it was like. Grew it out, start braiding it. And so me falling into, no, don't do braids. Don't do this. The fear, stereotypes, falling into all that. I remember telling him, don't let your blackness speak before you do. Because you're an educated young man. So filling him up with all of these things because of my fears. And so this particular child went out and all he did was let his blackness show. Just be, and he would tell me, he says, I didn't create stereotypes, so why should I? Why should I follow those? Why should I live my life trying to avoid stereotypes? And I thought, that's true. You didn't create them. You don't have to live under them. And that's one of the things that I find that as a parent, we run into. We try to squash and try to make our kids, I want you to fit in. I don't want you to get in trouble. But then we're creating that. We're just kind of perpetuating it within our lives. And so when he taught me that, it really made me examine me when I was examining him, but I was also examining him through the eyes of society. And then when I began to pull that back, I was able to create the exhibit called Springs of Black Man because he taught me something. What was going on the inside of him trying to be himself, trying to break out of this mold of, I don't want to fit into that world. I want to be who I am. I want to be this Black man. I want to be who I am. I don't want to mask who I am. So I'm going to wear braids, Mom. I'm going to wear my hair out. And, you know, I'll be honest, I was like, whose child is this? You always had nice haircuts. But that was the whole thing. Creating this exhibit helped me understand him and what his struggles were. And as parents, those are some of the things that we have to do. We have to actually self-examine ourselves, just us, because we're sometimes putting things on our children from our own fears and not necessarily for their good, because we're operating out of fear. So when I created this exhibit, I have this one piece and I created a poem around it. And it's a really large piece and I did want it. I was like, no, it would be great here. But it's really, really large. But there was one image in that piece, and it was of Huey P. Newton, because that particular piece deals a lot with the civil rights movement and all of the different that were part of the civil rights movement. And the poem that was written out of that was called Screams of a Black Man. And so the poem is literally written across the entire piece, along with amendments and rights and things like that that came out of that movement. And so Huey P. Newton was somebody that I had heard about but never read about. And so I was able to do research on all of these Black civil rights leaders, which was powerful for me because it's not something I've learned in school. And so the one portion of it was Huey P. Newton, and all I did was remove the paper from his eyes. And his eyes are very intense. And I thought, wow, these are amazing. You know, it's like artists often say, sometimes when we step back, we wonder if we did that. It's like, whoa, this is pretty fabulous. And so that haunted me for 3 years. And I don't mean like spooky haunted. But God just kept bringing me back to that one portion of this piece. And so 3 years later, down the road, I was sitting in my studio and that piece dropped in the spirit, that portion. And I was like, okay, God, obviously I'm supposed to do something. What? And that's where we're still watching outside. Because that's what was haunting me. Because he was staring out of that piece, watching. And I thought, wow, sometimes God just really keep on you. And you're not even ready for it. It's like, wow. And so I began to do research. And it wasn't just to cover the civil rights movement. It was to cover an entire body. And that's basically what this exhibit does. It's not, this exhibit is like Leanne was saying, it's to evoke conversation, to get people talking, to make them aware of what's going on. And that's why when she approached me about I call it my pretty art, because it is, I love it. And I told her, I said, with all the stuff that's going on, I have an exhibit that I feel fits what we're doing. And so she went to my website, she looked it up, and was like, oh yeah, I want that. It was like, I want that one. And so this particular exhibit I actually showed in Fort Collins during Juneteenth because they didn't have anything going on during Juneteenth. So I said, can I do it out in the square? I'll put up my little walls and I'll do it out in the square. And one of the things that really caught me was the conversations that were developing out of it. And I didn't have these cute little QR codes, which would have been wonderful to have. Those were developed here. Thank you, Kelly. Kelly did a wonderful job because we wanted to make it educational. Because what I ended up doing most of the time when I show this is sharing who everybody is to the people around because they want to know. And one of the conversations that came out was with a young man. And he came up to me, and because one of the questions I was asking was, how many of these people do you know? And they would say, not enough, or probably one or two. And, because everybody, when they first look at it, they think it's a Black History it's all about Black race. And then they go and they start seeing, oh, there's other people. There's a lot more people involved. And so one of the things that he and I talked about was one. He came up to me and says, you know what? I can't believe I don't know a lot of these people. And I just learned about the Tulsa race riots, Black Wall Street. He says, how is this even possible? That I never knew about these things. And I said, and that's when it struck me that for years, I used to tell people, you know, and you probably had this conversation with other Black people, it's like, they've robbed us of our history. We didn't learn any of our history in school. They didn't teach us our history. We were cheated. But the reality hit me that day was we all were cheated. Every single individual of America was cheated out of American history. Every single individual was cheated. That young man was nearly in tears because he's like, how did this happen? But see, I learned earlier that history is told through the eyes of the victor, which means that it's not always true. Or it's half true. We get half truths, we get a little bit of this, a little bit of that thrown in, but it's for them to look good. And so when you look at it that way, then you begin to say, okay, so then what is true? And how can I make this better? What can I do to make it better? All of the things that occurred in 2020 was all about bringing clarity to the United States. A lot of people are like, oh, 2020 was awful. 2020 was amazing. In my opinion, 2020 was absolutely amazing. Why? Because it opened our eyes. When you have 2020 vision, what is it? Clarity. It's like you get those glasses and it's like, whoa, I had no idea, I couldn't see. That's what 2020 did. God put glasses on all of us. And he was like, and we were like, whoa, I had no idea that this was going on. Now, some of us were like, yeah, well, I knew there was a lot of racism going on in the world. I knew this kind of thing was going on. But even still, to the extent of what happened during 2020, made everybody wake up a little bit. And some of us a lot. So then the question is, with everything that you saw and everything that you experienced, that's what these people are asking. What are you going to do about it? When you stand in this room and you stand in that center and you watch this, you look at this great cloud of witnesses, because that's what this is from. God gave me that verse to go along with it. The great cloud of witnesses for people who fought, stood up, stood the test of time, even though they had never seen the Messiah, but knew the promise of the Messiah. But never saw him. But they never gave up and they never quit. But they kept moving forward as if I'm going to see him. They died with merely a promise. And a lot of these people on these walls died with merely an idea of what it would be like. But it's got that. It's going to get better. I know it's going to get better. It's going to be, it may not be better for me, but it's going to be better for my children. It may not be better for me, but it's going to be better for my grandchildren. That's what they've done. And they're saying, what are you doing? What's the next move? How are you going to handle it? 2020 woke us up. And now it's like, now you're awake. Where do you go from here? What are you going to do? A lot of us could be like, oh, I'm just gonna, it's good to know. But then nothing else happens. It's like, whoa, there was a lot of riots and stuff like that. It was a lot of riots because that's how a lot of people were like, oh, we're gonna do something. I had a guy call me and he says, well, what have you been doing? I forgot what the conversation was, but then he tells me, well, what have you done? And I said, I do exhibits, I talk. He says, well, we did a riot in LA. I said, did you? I said, then what did you do? Then what did you do? You did a riot in LA. You felt accomplished. But what did you do after? Did you go to the school boards and say, hey, you know what? We need to change history. We need to fix something. We need to do more. Never answered me back. It was on Facebook. So I never got a reply. Because see, a lot of times we could go out and we could fight. And we can go and jump around and we can riot. But see, it takes more to sit down, write a proposal. It takes more to sit down and confront an entire school system. That takes time. That takes work. And some people are willing to invest that time and work, and others. But that's it. It's like we've gotten robbed out of history, which means your children have gotten robbed out of history, which means your grandchildren. So we change history and how it's taught in the schools. That's the next level. That's the next step. Not tearing down monuments, but rewriting the stories along with it, telling the whole entire story. People ask me about this particular exhibit because it's different. This is the candy races. And the reason why I created this is because they were trying to get rid of, they want to get rid of, what is it, Tom Sawyer.
Yeah.
They want to get rid of Gone with the Wind, those kind of things, because they don't understand periods. And when you start tearing those things down and erasing them, what are you doing? Moving. So just like we are just discovering all of these, that's what happened. They got buried. They got hidden. One of the stories I like to tell is a young lady over here. I can't remember her name.
Victoria.
What is it?
Victoria.
She was the first woman to run for president. But because it was buried. They didn't want anybody to. Why? Because at that time, women didn't even have the right to vote. So of course I don't want to know. I don't want these other women I don't want that to get out. Why? Because it adds strength. It adds, I can do that. Why don't I do it? So what do? They work to destroy it and bury it. And that's what they do. Why? Let's bury it. Let's hide the truth so that it doesn't get out. I remember when I first found out about some of the Black inventors. I was like, what? That's incredible. We've done that much. But you don't know about it. Why? It's buried. Because it gives strength. It gives you the dream that this is possible. I can do this. The best way to keep somebody down is to destroy dreams. Destroy the dream. Destroy the ability to achieve. And that's what has been happening in our world. I'm going to read this one. This is from W.E.B. Du Bois. It says, one is astounding, the study of history, at the reoccurrence of the idea that evil must be forgotten, distorted, skimmed over. We must not remember that Daniel Webster got drunk, but only that he was a splendid constitutional lawyer. We must forget that George Washington was a slave owner, and simply remember the things we regard as credible and inspiring. The difficulty with this philosophy is that history loses its value as an incentive and example. It paints perfect men and noble nations, but it does not tell the truth. So for years, we've been living a lie because our history has not been told the truth. So this exhibit is about truth and what will we do with the truth that's been exposed all of 2020? What will we do with it? Where will we carry it? What will we say about it? We're sitting next to people. Are we going to continue to perpetuate the stereotypes? Are we going to continually look at each other differently than ourselves? That's the whole thing. It's like when I did this exhibit right here, this particular one is called "If You Shoot Me, Will I Not Die?" And I did that particular exhibit during the time where a lot of our young African Americans were shot, those kind of things. It's like everybody kept getting off. And it reminded me of just modern day lynching. And I was always the Merchant of Venice. I've never seen the Merchant of Venice, but this particular portion of the Merchant of Venice had stayed with me when I read it. And every year it would come. And I'm like, okay, what? And it was for this. It was for this piece. And I just rearranged the words. It's still that one, but it was about Jews. That's not a Jew eyes. That's not a Jew hands, feet. Same thing. I wrote a song, it's called What Do You See When You Look at Me? Because that's what it is. It's like the value you place on people. And it's not just Black Jews. On this side, I have the Irish potato family. Here we have the Native American. There's so many stories. And the reason I create the doors is because the doors are our gateways to truth. Walking through those doors and seeing it. Don't close them. Hide it. A lot of times we want to tuck things away. We want to hide it. Because I don't want anybody, you've heard the whole thing, skeletons in the closet. Nobody wants their skeletons to come out of the closet. But see, sometimes skeletons need to be exposed. Because you cannot heal and you cannot change something that you're hiding. It can only be changed, only healed, it's exposed. So open the door, walk through it, and then change what's in it. Let people see it, expose it. Because being able to expose things lets everybody know, oh my gosh, this is what happened. I believe that if history had been told in its fullest and included everything, a lot of the racial tensions that we have today would have been dispelled. Now, I'm not saying it would have been gone. Folks are just folks. But I do believe that a lot of it would have been dispelled because we would be understanding each other's struggle. But since we don't, then Black folks are lazy. They don't do anything. Nobody knows the struggle. Indians, they're just mad. They just mad. All Indians do is mad. They run around. Because they don't know the story. People don't know the story. They don't know the Irish story. They don't know the Italian story, how they had their retreats. They don't know the story. And so I believe that if the stories had been exposed, then people would understand the stories. I always tell people, if you were born in America, you've gone through generations. America is just full of mutts. There is not a single person in America that's not mixed with another. Unless you just came over on the boat. I have people that, I trace myself back to the Mayflower. Like, okay, that's cool. But I guarantee you trace yourself back to the Mayflower. Somewhere there was a little mixing up in them. So if we just see each other as humans, and just see the world that way, and tell truth, and stop trying to hide everything, we would be better. And we'd be better for each other. Because we would learn the stories on everybody's struggles. And then if you know the story about everybody's struggles, then you're not so caught up in your own struggle. You're like, man, they just had this is bad for me. So I'm gonna end it there because I don't want to take a lot of it. You have some questions, I can take some questions, and
At home, are you always working as an artist? Is it your full-time work? And how long did it take to create? This is a collection of different exhibitions. So then how many years did it take to bring this together?
oh wow. It was over the course of a few, because it started with the faces. It started with the great cloud of witnesses. It started with those. And then I'm like, okay, great, great cloud of witnesses, this is fantastic. Put those together, and then the doors came. Like, the doors. And actually, when Leanne was like, "Oh, I want this exhibit," I was like, "Oh, that's an easy pack up. I'll just pack all of the faces up." And Leanne's like, "No, we want the doors too." And I was like, "Yeah, you want the doors?" It's like, that's gonna be interesting to send the doors. And so she was like, "No, we want the doors. We want the whole thing." I should have never sent it to the website because they saw the whole thing on the website. And I was like, "Okay, well then I'll do the doors and I'll have to pack up," because our biggest thing was to pack up was the barbed wire. We're like, how do we pack that barbed wire?
The artist think the name.
Yeah. I was like, how do we pack that barbed wire up without, destroying everything else? And so that came. And then after that came the shoots. And so they all come in stages. And then all the doors didn't come at the same time. I think the last door that I did was the Irish. And that door really, really struck me because it's a story that's not widely told. And it's a story that most people don't. And so I was sharing with them, I left that door sat outside. And my husband was like, "Ooh, this door is gonna get destroyed. You could have it outside." But I loved what the elements were doing to it. It was tearing some of the paint off, because the whole door was painted, and it was removing things, because that was what's happening in our world. Erasing truth, hiding, getting rid of it. We don't want the world to know. That's why we don't know. That's why it's not widely known about the Irish potato famine, because it was so, I don't want people to know. It's like slavery, we know. Can't get rid of that. It was all over. The Holocaust, they're even trying to erase that. It's like that didn't happen. And I'm sure eventually slavery wouldn't happen. No, that didn't happen. They're just talking. That didn't happen. Because if you think about all the things that happened during last year, the monuments that are being torn down. Why? Oh yeah, let it happen. Because if they're not there, you don't see it. Nobody will remember it. And then years down the road, it'll be gone. Those who don't remember their past.
Yep.
After. So if we can wipe it all away, let them tear it down. Why not? That's more for us.
Do you have thoughts? I mean, you're obviously putting history on the walls. Do you have thoughts about nationally long-term ways of putting history back onto the streets and into daily lives that we would benefit?
Well, a lot of artists are doing it now. They've already started. I do a show called Black Art and Culture, and his name is Joe Griffin. One of the things that he talks about is adding to the story. Adding to the story. Don't destroy the story. Add the rest of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think it was Shedrick? They're actually in her hometown. They're adding to the stories of these monuments. And that to me is the thing. That's what we need to do. It's like if you have a monument in your town, it's like, okay, how can we add to this story? How can we add to? How can we finish the story? Instead of tearing the story down, instead of destroying the monument, then how can we add to it? Okay, so this guy was famous for, what was the guy that was famous for, forgive me, gynecology? Famous for it. But the women that he tortured to get to that point, tell the story. Tell the whole story. He tortured many Black women because he felt they didn't feel pain like white women. Tortured. And he has a monument up because he is, known for that. He made all those breakthroughs, but why and how did he make them? They don't know that, so they don't know that in the story. So tell it. Tell the truth. Don't tear the monument down, but tell the rest of the story. But Louise, telling that story is just horrific. Yes, it is very horrific, but it's the truth. And that's the problem. We want to get away from the truth. That's what Du Bois was.
Arian Sims. Sims was his name.
Right. Tell the truth. Tell the rest of the story. Share it. And people might be repulsed, like, oh, but you know the truth. And so in that's what we want to do. You see something, be like, I want to know the rest of the story. And be inquisitive. Don't just take everything at face value. It's like, okay, that's a really cool monument. But what's the story behind it? What's the rest of the story? That's why I love these QR codes. Because you can go and get the rest of the story. We should go and tell people, it's like, if you put a monument up, there should be a QR code next to it. It's like, there should be a QR code next to this monument so that I can zoom in on it and I can find out the whole story. So there you go. That would be one. Put QR codes next to all of these monuments with, here's the rest of the story. I think that would be very powerful. That would be powerful. So the story that I read. That's God. I don't expect you to answer that question, but it's not just but what's he doing? Like, he provided to free us from sin. One guy is I was still this is question. I know, and that's why this thing we wish. I'm like, God, how often have we sat in our rooms and bedrooms? We're going through different things and we're like, really, God? Where's this going? I know there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but can I at least see a little bit of it? Just a peek of, like, see some of the light at the end of the tunnel? And that's just it. It's like with all of this, and that's why I feel like with 2020, I feel like God was revealing things to us. If you remember, back in the day, God would send a prophet to a town because he was either about to destroy it or heal it. And I feel like 2020 was our prophet. And God said, I'm sending you a 2020 prophet. Didn't come in the form of one man coming to your town, 96 per day. But I feel like he sent a revelation to us. And he's saying, now what? What are you going to do with the knowledge I just gave you? Because whenever he sent a prophet to those towns, it was so that they can impart knowledge to that king or that person. And so we can ask the question, okay, Lord, what are you doing? But God is saying, what are you doing? I just gave you a buttload of knowledge. I did say load of knowledge. 2020. Now, what are you going to do? And so we can always go back and be like, Lord, what are you doing? And he's like, Did you just ask me that question? I just opened up Pandora's box. Now I want to know what you're going to do with it. So that's how we have to look at it. It's like God is wondering, not what he's doing. He's wondering, that's the rest of the story. Exactly. That's the rest of the story. What are we doing? What we just learned. Thank you guys. We just say really quick while everyone's listening that if you know someone who from a sentence see this, and they're all different days of the week, and we're just open, it'll just be open like a Catholic. So you know, come back and see it again or send to the show. Love that. And at least it didn't say